Today we're going to be power ranking every SEC team.
Let's go, Vandy fans. Anchor's down, but the doors are up.
Welcome to the PCS Volcast. We cover the SEC and everything Vols.
Yeah, this is our second edition of the SEC team power rankings. A lot has changed since week 3. Some teams have fallen, some teams have risen. And just like before, me and Shea do our individual rankings, and then we combine them to get an official PCS Volcast power ranking.
All right, so let's start with 16.
Yeah, and just like last time, actually, Mississippi State Bulldogs are number 16. They actually are a little bit better than we thought they were, kind of at the beginning of the season. Once Blake Shapen went out, we kind of just thought their season was over, and it was. But they actually have a little bit to look forward to with Michael Van Buren, who, again, has been playing a little bit better than we anticipated.
Yeah, they're definitely playing better than we thought, but there's no team worse than them.
Right, no, their defense is horrible. They're just a bad team. Let's see, in the FPI, ESPN's FPI, they are 72nd in the country, and the second worst team, the Kentucky Wildcats, are 50, which is a pretty big drop off.
Yeah. Speaking of Kentucky, we have them at 15.
Yeah, they fell. They were one of the big fallers. We had them at 12. Now they're at 15 for us. They just don't have the offense to really compete with a lot of these teams. Their best hope is to get teams in a kind of a grind fest, I guess. Slow down the pace, impose their will on defense, but they just don't have a lot offensively they can lean on.
Yeah, I think we made our rankings previously after the Georgia game.
Right.
And so we thought Kentucky would surprise some people later on in the season, but in fact they have surprised us in the opposite way, where they've been even worse than we thought.
Yes.
So at 13, we have a tie between Auburn and Oklahoma.
Yeah, I had Oklahoma at 13 and Auburn at 14. I just did that because they beat them head-to-head. If that was played on a neutral field, that probably go into triple overtime. Everyone would get hurt. No one would play well. But yeah, Oklahoma is just a dumpster fire offensively. They don't know what they're doing at quarterback. They fire their offensive coordinator. All the receivers are injured. Their O-line's terrible. It's just nothing really good is happening in the Oklahoma offense right now. And it's translating to them being a bad team. Their defense has been good, and their defense is good, but it's not enough to just get them win after win.
And Auburn is different in the way that they feel a lot more complete and consistent. They're just consistently bad.
Right.
They know what they have, and they've been in some close ones, but they just keep losing. We're waiting for Hugh Freeze to really show why he's such a great coach and whatnot, everything we've been hearing about, but it hasn't happened so far. So Here they are at 13, tied with Oklahoma.
I think that Auburn's kind of ready for a new quarterback, which can maybe unlock Hugh Freeze's system more or something.
Oh, definitely.
But yeah, but I will say, out of all the teams that we've mentioned, Jarquez Hunter is by far the best individual player, which kind of gives them the edge a little bit.
Yeah, so at 12, we have the Florida Gators.
Florida moved up one spot from 13 in our first rankings to now 12. And, Florida's just an interesting team overall. Mertz is out for the year. Montrell Johnson's dealt with injuries. And their guys have stepped up behind him. DJ Lagway has been pretty good in Graham Mertz's wake. And Jordan Ball just went off for 5 touchdowns in the game last week.
Yeah, they're hot right now.
But, the brunt of their schedule is still to come. They have Georgia. I believe they have Texas as well. I had them winning one game, actually, against Ole Miss. You never know what could happen.
At 11, we have the South Carolina Gamecocks.
Yeah, they kind of just went up. They're one SEC game ahead of everyone else. They have to play Texas A&M, who's actually one of the biggest risers since our last rankings, as well as Vandy, who is definitely the biggest riser since our last rankings, and Missouri. Excuse me. I had them winning against Missouri. Missouri is in shambles right now. But again, South Carolina, year one of Lenore Sellers, you don't really expect too much, but going forward, they might be better.
They've got a lot of highs and a lot of lows.
Right.
You never know what to expect from them.
And, their defensive line is really, really good. Their pass defense as a whole is good. You don't trust Sellers to win you games, really. You trust him to make interesting plays every once in a while, but not to win you games. So yeah, this is kind of like a feeling out year for South Carolina.
Yeah, and they could have a few more wins as well, but they lost the close ones, and I
Yep.
think that comes down to coaching
Yep.
and having a freshman quarterback. But
Yep.
I believe that they have their future quarterback, which is a good thing for them.
100% agree, and I think if they play the same schedule 2 years from now, they win those close ones. They lose them.
Yep. Speaking of Missouri, we have them at 10.
This was one of the hardest ones to rank because their entire team relies on Brady Cook.
Yep.
And if he's not playing, they're bad. You could even drop them lower than 10.
Yeah.
If he is playing, they're still not great. I would have them maybe around the 7 to 8 range or so, but this is kind of a middle ground for if he comes back or if he doesn't. But yeah, I mean, they scored 0 points against Alabama, a vulnerable Alabama defense without Brady Cook. They were terrible against Auburn without Brady Cook. And yeah, they're just not very good.
Yeah, I'm a big Missouri hater. I really don't believe in them. Coming into the season, they were obviously ranked way too high. They should be able to. I mean, they have one of the easiest schedules in the SEC,
yeah.
and they're still sitting here with 2 losses, I believe.
There's
stats,
right? And yes, there's stats, and kind of everything looks better than it actually is because their schedule's been so easy. And then the 2 competent teams they've played, in A&M and Alabama, they get destroyed in both of them. So I think the writing was kind of on the wall. When they struggled against like Boston College,
right,
and some of these other teams that aren't good. And now, as I say, once the competition rises a little bit, they don't look good.
Yeah, so they fell from 6 all the way down to 10. So next we have Vandy, America's favorite team here.
Vanderbilt has definitely been the best story in college football this season, along with Diego Pavia, their maybe Heisman contending quarterback. I don't know if he has the stats for it, but he's been playing like a Heisman contender at least. They take down Alabama. They narrowly lose to Texas. Both of their SEC losses have only been 6 combined points. But just the fact that we're talking about them like a real team says a whole lot considering what they've done in the past few years.
Yeah, Clark Lee has been really impressive this year, and, with the help of Diego Pavia. But this team just has so much heart.
Mm-hmm.
They go into every game expecting to win,
Mm-hmm.
and it just makes them so much fun to watch.
Going forward, they have Auburn and South Carolina, which I both wrote down as wins for them. And then the 2 losses, LSU and Tennessee, you really don't know. They play Tennessee at home, so any home game is a possibility. Playing in Baton Rouge, always difficult, but you never know what could happen.
But, yeah, anyway, so they jump up from 15 all the way up to 9. And then at 8, we have Ole Miss.
Ole Miss is like similar vibes to Missouri in a way. I think were overrated, but Ole Miss's stats look amazing, like defensively and offensively both, because the competition they played hasn't been great. And the other reason why I relate them to Missouri so much is because, like Missouri, when Ole Miss's best player is not playing, Trey Harris, they just look like a different team. He is probably the best receiver in the country. He's been out for, I guess, 2. I think he went out in the LSU game. He's been out for 2 games now, and if they don't get him back, they could end up dropping Georgia, obviously. And I had them losing to Florida if Trey Harris does not play. That game is in the swamp. I can see Florida, DJ Legway has his best game of his career, and then they lose that game. Their other wins that I have are against Arkansas and Mississippi State.
And their wins against low-level competition have been so ugly. And then, Lane Kiffin, of course, has to cheat to get his free timeouts. And he still loses to Kentucky. So I don't trust Ole Miss at all. I trust them a little bit more than Missouri, but they deserve to be stuck at 8. Next, we have Arkansas at 7.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they're winning against Tennessee, obviously, boost them up a lot here. They are a inconsistent team. They beat Tennessee at home, and then they followed it up with a terrible game against LSU, also at home. And then they follow that up with a record-breaking performance against Mississippi State. So you never really know what Arkansas you're going to get. But, as if we're recording this, they have 3 ranked teams remaining on their schedule. Missouri will inevitably fall out. But at home against Ole Miss and home against Texas, if they can get one of those games, that's going to be really good for them.
It feels crazy to say that their biggest accomplishment this year is making a bowl game. But, obviously they weren't projected to be as good as they've been, but they have been pretty on par with their projected record,
Mm-hmm.
unfortunately for them, besides their big Tennessee upset.
Yeah, we had Arkansas at 14 in our first rankings, and now they're at 7. I mean, I know that I've said this many times in the past. Taylor Green is inconsistent, but when you get a good Taylor Green, they could maybe be higher than 7.
Right. So at 6 we have Alabama.
Alabama just has not been playing to their standard this season at all. Could it be Kalen DeBoer? Could it be Milroe isn't as good as we think? We know, obviously, their defense is not up to snuff either. But, yeah, I mean, they just kind of fall in this tier of the SEC, which, doesn't really compete for the SEC championship. There, unfortunately, is still, we're Tennessee fans, unfortunately, is still a backdoor way they could make it to the playoffs. But that would include them beating LSU in Baton Rouge next week, which I don't see that happening. I predicted LSU to win that game.
Yeah, even after the LSU loss, I still see Bama really struggling on the road. Bama has been surprising to me in that Kalen DeBoer has really been pretty disappointing, and so has Milroe, especially after his Georgia game. Watching him in the first half, I thought he was going to win the Heisman.
Yep.
And ever since the start of the second half, he has just fallen off a cliff. I don't see him picking it back up, and I don't see them making the playoffs either.
The fall off from Bryce Young to Jalen Milroe is really unfortunate for Alabama. I mean, Bryce Young was pretty much the pinnacle of consistency, and he would give you those insane, how did he do that type of plays. Milroe only has those insane plays, but he also has a lot of bad screw-ups, and then he's not consistent at all.
Right.
The other thing about Alabama is their lack of running offense has been surprising to me. They have a lot of talent still, of course, and they just haven't really been able to translate that into solid performances, although they did just blast Missouri in their last game.
But it's Missouri.
It's Missouri without Brady Cook,
Right. All right, so at 5 we have LSU.
This is where we start to get into the real contenders in the SEC. LSU has not been that solid this season. Despite only losing one SEC game, like they beat South Carolina only by 3. They only beat Ole Miss by 3, and then they just lost this past week to Texas A&M. There's still a world where they can compete, especially picking up a game against a win against Alabama would help them a lot. But it's going to be kind of a tough road for them now that they've lost to A&M. I think the saying is they don't control their own destiny at this point.
Right, and Nussmeier really dropped the ball in
He
that
did,
second
yeah.
half. Kind of similar to what we were just talking about with Milroe. That was totally unexpected. The 3 picks in one half, and they were all identical. It was bad. And Texas A&M proved that they were going to be the number 1 team in the SEC at the moment. But I still want to put LSU pretty up there. Like you said, this is the contender range.
Right.
I would not be surprised to see them, in the postseason.
I have a lot of faith in LSU, assuming that Nussmeier plays up to his standards.
Right.
If Nussmeier plays bad, this team can fall off a cliff pretty quickly. Their defense is pretty solid. They it's LSU. They're going to have weapons on the outside, specifically like Kyron Lacey is amazing. But when Nussmeier has a performance like he did against A&M, they could be a first-round exit for sure in the playoff.
At 4, we have Tennessee.
Yeah, Tennessee surprisingly has stayed at 4. We had them at 4 in our first week or week 3 ranking. The reason why that's surprising is because our whole identity has changed from what we thought we were at the time. Offensively, we're pretty bad. We're probably bottom 5 offensively right now, which is disappointing considering how Tennessee has played in the past few years. But yeah, Tennessee is sitting at 1 SEC loss, and if they win out other than Georgia, they still have a chance to make the SEC title, and they will be probably a playoff lock at that point.
Yeah, this team is the opposite of Arkansas. We are disappointing. The eye test is disappointing, but the record is about where we thought we'd be.
Right.
We thought we'd lose one or both of the Alabama-Georgia games. So we thought we were either going to be sitting at 10-2 or 11-1. Looks like we'll be sitting at 10-2. Not to give too early of a prediction,
Right.
but
We're still on pace for that.
still on pace to be exactly where we were projected to be.
Mm-hmm. And I will say, if Nico can pick up the slack, I think that we have a really good shot to make the national championship game. I know that we're biased, But our defense has been something else this year. And we've seen a lot of these other SEC teams drop games that, people weren't really expecting. So I feel like we just need that one more piece of Nico playing like a 5-star, and then we can be on our way.
Yes, I agree. All right, at number 3 we have Texas A&M.
This was a really difficult one to rank. I mean, you really can't rank them much lower just because of the record, because of the record. They had that one loss to Notre Dame when Wegman was the starter at the beginning of the season. He played horrible, but now he's probably out of there. Unless Marcel Reed just plays terrible or gets injured. This is Marcel Reed's team now, and they've been, nothing short of exceptional with Marcel Reed as their quarterback. Their defense has been really good. Marcel Reed looks really good. And, the only thing about A&M is that their schedule is pretty weak. So it's kind of hard to gauge, what this team really is. And I've been low on them all year, especially with Wegman as the quarterback. But after that win against LSU, I really have no room to hate on them, I guess.
Yeah, I don't know what to make of the Aggies. I know that they're a well-rounded team, but it felt like they were going to lose to LSU last night. They ended up pulling away at the end, but they're another team that I guess I expect them to win, but I wouldn't be surprised if they lost.
I mean,
that's the type of team they are to me.
They have South Carolina and Auburn left, who are both in the bottom 5 of our rankings, and then to end out the year they have Texas.
Right.
So if they, walk away with one SEC loss this season, they're going to be looked at as a very good team, and not to discredit them because they are, but I just feel like we're never going to figure out how good they actually are until the Texas game.
Speaking of, at number 2 we have Texas.
Mm-hmm. They're, pretty much still as solid as we thought they were. Maybe not as consistent as we thought they were. When we did these rankings in week 3, they were like the undisputed number 1 team in the country. They had really not had a bad series, right, in their whole schedule. Even with their backup quarterback, they were still dogging everybody. And then the Georgia game happens, and they look, beatable, very beatable. And then this Vandy game happens, and, they only beat them by 3. So, as I said, Texas is still a super strong team, and they are a national championship contender, but they're not number 1 anymore, to say the least.
Yeah, I don't want to see Texas on my schedule, but I have been very surprised by how much they dropped off since playing Georgia. I was not expecting it to be a blowout at halftime.
In Austin, too.
In Austin, yeah. And then at number 1, we have the Georgia Bulldogs.
You can't really have any other team here. It's either Texas or Georgia, and Georgia beat Texas, right?
Right.
I mean, if you want to argue A&M is number 1, I guess I can't really fault you for that because they're number 1 in the standings. But this is power rankings; those are different. Yeah, Georgia had the one loss to Bama. I think that was their get right kind of thing. They followed that up with not really putting Mississippi State away. But I mean, it's Georgia, right? I mean, there's really not much to say here. I don't think they're as talented or consistent as they've been in the past. But, yeah, I mean, they are probably they're top 3 in the country in national championship odds.
Yeah, if their defense continues to play exactly how we thought they would play, and if Beck can not be a turnover machine, I mean, they can win it all again.
They have all the tools to win it all, certainly.
Yeah, this is a weird year in the SEC. It doesn't feel like they should be number 1, but it's, like you said, who else would be?
There's just so much infighting. There's no clear team, and I love that, though.
There's more so just tiers.
Right.
But we got Georgia at 1. They were at 3.
Right.
Last time we actually had Bama at 2, which is pretty surprising.
I had Georgia at 4, which... Yeah, that wasn't the best ranking. But at the time, they were looking beatable in the Mississippi State game as well. And they are beatable. Georgia, this is probably the most beatable Georgia's been in a while. But, yeah.
Thank you so much for listening. This has been the PCS Volcast. Stay tuned for our Kentucky versus Tennessee preview and prediction. And please subscribe and like this video. We're going to be putting out content similar to this. Soon enough, we're going to be having our SEC quarterback rankings. We love doing our rankings, and so we're not going to stop here.
Right.
So stay tuned for that. Again, thank you for listening and subscribe. This has been Shea and Jace.
Go Vols.
Go Vols.